www.offthecorner.net. You're watching the Fact Project, and Fact, of course, is an acronym that stands for Fundamental African Centered Thought. The goal here on the Fact Project is to convey some facts and some information to members of our community. We have joining us one of my favorite guests, educator, author, activist, and exceptional speaker, Brother Agyei Tyehimba. Peace, Brother Agyei. Thank you for joining us today, brother.
Peace, good brother. When you was doing that introduction, I was like, who's he talking about?
Who's
I
that guy?
appreciate it.
I want to meet him, right? That's funny. Brother Agyei, how you been, man? We I had to cancel a few times. It's my first time back on in a few weeks. So I'm just trying to basically catch my breath from everything that has been going on. How have you been, bro?
Hey, man, I've been blessed, bro. I'm grateful. The stars are aligned. I'm working hard. It's funny because I'm 58. I've been through a billion different medical crises, but I'm more productive now than I was at 20 years of age. And that's a fact.
Okay.
And I guess that comes with the knowledge you get over time. You learn not to be wise and make better choices, you know. So okay. I'm grateful.
So there's a certain psychology to being more productive in your 50s as opposed to your 20s, I suppose you're saying, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to get back to it later, but what can you tell us about the digital ebooks that you have now?
Well, if people if they look up Wukusu products, they'll probably find my PayHip account. It's 20 ebooks I've done, and I'm really trying to adjust and not be rigid. I know I prefer traditional books that you hold in your hand and you turn the pages. But a lot of the younger people and our 30 to 40 somethings are increasingly reading ebooks because they could take it on their phones, their tablets, or laptops. So I'm trying to adjust. And so they're all empowerment books. All of my ebooks are about being on time, discipline, avoiding distractions, finishing what we start, and showing people how to do it. So it's not a lot of rah-rah. It's straight up, we dealing with the issue, the problems, and we resolving them. So people who are struggling in those areas, those would be good books. And it's a book on anxiety. There's a lot of good stuff on the things we deal with every day. So I'm hoping, and it's a sale, you know, for the holiday. I'm really pushing this book right now, Crossing the Finish Line, which talks about how to finish what we start, how to take an invisible idea and bring it to fruition. That seems to be something we many of us are challenged with. Many bright, creative, intelligent people, but they're challenged with how to take it from the beginning stage to the end. So that book I'm pushing more so than anything right now during the holidays. 75, it's like a 25% discount, so it's like $7.50. 45-page ebook.
That's good stuff. And I think I got 2 of those, and I'm going to speak from my own lived experience. They're actually really good, and it's actually been very helpful for me. Like there's certain things that I do every day now that I'm learning from what you're writing, and it's helping me to be a little bit more productive in some of the endeavors that I'm trying to engage in. Yeah, so it's good stuff. It's sort of people watching this. It's not going to be a waste of your time. It's not going to be a waste of your money, and like you say, you can bring it with you everywhere you go. You know, you're on a train, you're getting bored. Instead of playing a video game or doom scrolling on social media, you can go and get some information from these books right there on the phone. So I think it's a good move. I think it's a good look. So we're going to come back to that. I put the link in the chat, payhip.com/Wukusu products. Am I saying that right?
Yes, sir. Many thanks.
Okay, now I'm coming to you on today's subject because, in my opinion, you are one of the foremost experts on the Black Power movement. Of course, we just lost the legendary H.Rap Brown, aka Imam Jamil Al-Amin. I want to, before I go into the first question, for the people that may or may not know, H.Rap Brown was born Hubert Gerald Brown. He later became known as Imam Jamil Al-Amin. He was a prominent, fiery Black Power leader of the 1960s. He was chair of SNCC, and he aligned himself also at some point with the Black Panther Party. He's known for militant rhetoric, like violence is as American as cherry pie. before becoming a Muslim imam and community activist in Atlanta, Georgia, where after he became Muslim, he was not as fiery as he used to be. But it refers to what he said as militant rhetoric. Before I ask my first question, the word militant comes from the word militate, which means to prevent something. And to be militant and to prevent something in a very aggressive and assertive way. What is your, I guess, overview or your perspective now on the life of H. Rap Brown, aka Imam Jamil Abdullah Alameen?
All right. Well, brother, you basically used up all my talking points.
That's
You did the whole show for me, brother.
funny. That's funny.
I'm joking with you. So I think first of all, I want to take a moment and just spiritually give the brother his due, and all of the political prisoners who have passed their due, and all of the political prisoners who are still languishing in the dungeons of the United States and other countries their due for their serious commitment and their serious sacrifice. I can't imagine being locked away from my loved ones for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and allegedly not having access to the medications I might need, the medical services I might need, and things of that nature. So I really, one of the things I committed to, I said for next year, I'm going to be more assertive and aggressive about supporting and educating the community and rallying the community's resources and energies around the issue of our political prisoners. So this is very personal to me. I think it's important how we stand up for the people who stood up for us. Says everything about us, everything about who we are. And if we don't stand up for people who stood up for us, we ain't worth for you know what. We really not. So let me say, H. Rap Brown, who of course became a Muslim imam and changed his name to Jamil Al-Amin, was a phenomenal student leader. I want to locate him first as a student leader, a college student activist, part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee known as SNCC. He was the fifth chairperson of SNCC, taking over right after Stokely Carmichael, who became Kwame Ture. Right? They call him Rap as a middle name, as a nickname, because of his ability to speak. You know, he could rap. It's kind of what some say hip hop or whatever. When they say rap, that's where that comes from. One's ability to flow, eloquence, being articulate. He is critical because at the time, about 67, when he's becomes the fifth chairman of SNCC, SNCC was Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It was also an integrationist piece. It comes out of the civil rights movement, right? So SNCC had black people, white people, northerners, southerners, largely college students, but not all, but mostly college students, activists, fighting together to desegregate the country, to get rid of Jim Crow laws. But in 67, remember, you have this Black Power movement, this Black Arts movement, that's now increasingly nationalist and Pan-Africanist. They're following the words of Brother Malcolm, who was shot down in 65, right? And so this is a time where black people are now reassessing. They're disillusioned by the civil rights movement that it did not produce the gains it said it would produce, right? It did not fundamentally change the power equation. It had some laws and legislation passed, but remember, Brown versus Board is 1955. In 63, 64, 65, schools were still segregated. So a lot of black, especially young people, were very disillusioned and disappointed because many of them were activists in the civil rights movement, freedom riders, right? And they said, you know what? They're looking at Malcolm. They're listening to him more seriously. And then when he gets killed, that just took the movement to another notch. So many nonviolent student activists became, as you mentioned, militant black nationalists, cultural nationalists, revolutionary nationalist activists, right? And H. Rap Brown kind of comes into SNCC around the time that SNCC is now telling white people, you got to go. SNCC is no longer an integrationist organization. It has now issued a whole paper and said that we are now consider ourselves black nationalists, and our organizations fighting for us must be all black. So they kicked the white the white students out of SNCC. This is very controversial, right? And this is when H.R. Brown was in power. Fiery rhetoric, a great militant spokesman of nationalism, calling on people to defend ourselves, to establish ties with our African brothers and sisters around the world. He became, because then there was a time where SNCC and the Black Panther Party had an alliance, so he also became the Minister of Justice for the Black Panther Party. It was kind of short-lived, but just like Stokely Carmichael became, I believe, the Minister of Education at one point for the Black Panther Party. But definitely, he represents to me that shift from the nonviolent, direct action, civil rights integrationist approach to change, morphing now into a more militant, direct action, but more militant and not necessarily always nonviolent. Some of the things were nonviolent, but some of them were advocating retaliatory violence or self-defense, that we're not a violent people, but we have the right to protect ourselves and our people. And also this push less for becoming part of American society and more to create our own institutions, to link up with our brothers and sisters around the world and on the continent of Africa, and to be self-determined, right? So he represents that kind of shift. And I should say he also sadly represents, what happens, our need to be some more aggressive and assertive about what we want, to reframe what we want as just to have a better plot on the plantation, to we want our own nation, but also the sacrifice that comes with that. The real the state represses people and organizations who push that line and engage in such activities. And H.R. Brown, in some respects, was a casualty of that. He and many others, he's a casualty of that. Mutulu Shakur, I can name a whole bunch of people. What do I mean by that? Well, he was arrested several times. He was, COINTELPRO haunted him and harassed him all over the country, wherever he went, surveyed him. And when they couldn't get him young, because he became an imam, and he kind of shifted his politics a little bit, but he was still in Atlanta as a Muslim imam, reducing black on black, so-called black on black violence, right? Helping people to get off drugs. He's still doing really important nation building work, just in a kind of a different modality, so to speak. And they still kept harassing him no matter what he was doing and talking. And finally, many years later, in the year 2000, family, now, in the year 2000, this is like 40 years after he was a young man active in the Black Power movement. So he's now an older man, and they're still harassing him. They charged him with the killing of a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy and gave him life imprisonment, even though there's a lot of questions about the veracity of the evidence and the sort of political intentions behind that arrest. So he's now in jail for life, right? And he died last month. I want to say the 22nd, 23rd, in North Carolina, in a prison, in a medical facility in a federal prison. But what people need to know is that when he was in that prison as an older man, he died at the age of 82. So he's one of the, if you think about it, to be a Black Power activist, prominent as he was, militant as he was, uncompromising as he was, and to be an octogenarian, to live to the 80s, is a major achievement for any one of us in this country. But for him and that type of persona he had, that's really remarkable to live to be 82. And he suffered with serious medical issues. So one of the things we got to bring up, or that comes to light with Brother H.R. Brown, is the way that they treat those of us who they capture behind enemy lines, so to speak, and imprison us. I believe the Eighth Amendment says there should be no cruel and unusual punishment. That's in the Constitution, but that's routinely violated in this country with our political prisoners and our prisoners of war that are in their dungeons called prisons. When a person has, as he had, multiple myeloma, that's a cancer that affects your bone marrow. He also suffered from Sjogren's disease or syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease, and that gives you chronic joint pain that never quite goes. It comes and goes and comes and goes, and it can be excruciating. Organ complications, great fatigue, dryness in the eyes and the mouth. And some say that he was not given proper medical treatment. Now, we shouldn't be surprised because he's an enemy of their state as they see it. But if anyone saw the last pictures of him, he had a growth coming out of his cheek that looked like a small cannonball, ridiculous. So we might say that he was tortured and he was treated unfairly and cruelly, whether it was done intentionally or by negligence. The fact is, he didn't die a natural death. He died in a prison that hated him, by a state that harassed him just about his whole life. And so I'm quite angered when I think about. I was very angry when Asada died. I cried and I was saddened. When I heard about him, I was angry because at least Asada got to escape the confines of the United States. Our brother H.R. Brown was still here, captured behind enemy lines, and I believe that they made him pay. They made him pay. I believe that in their little prison world, using their power. But I believe he represents what happens when we fight back and we resist. That there have to be those of us who are willing to pay that price, because we will pay a price when you resist the state. And he, to his credit, was courageous enough to pay that price, and he suffered. He was punished and followed and harassed his entire adult life. It's amazing, over decades.
Yeah, there's a few things that you said there that I want to go back to. Years ago, the great Omar Wali Malcolm X told us that the 1/10 is our enemy. And if you know the teachings of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, you know who the 1/10 is. And speaking of the great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she said racism is war on Black people, which is why I keep this close right here. The Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I think if we don't understand our situation in the system of structural racism, which is based on the myth of white supremacy, within the context of warfare, we'll never quite solve our problems and do anything that will really transform the condition of the group. Now, you said a few things in there that I definitely want to go back to. It seems like when one of us, we either make the enemy look bad or we defeat the enemy, they have a way of not forgetting. You mentioned Assata Shakur. We're talking about H.R. Brown. The country of Haiti got its independence. And it seems the system never forgot what these people did in terms of either defeating the system or making them look bad. Can you expound on that idea of the system, like not forgetting and always trying to either make an example of us or destroy our forward momentum?
Absolutely. I think this goes back to what my first formal academic background is in, is sociology. That's the study of groups. Why people move the way they move, why they react to oppression the way they do, all types of things dealing with the group. Whereas psychology deals with individuals and their mindset, right? So this is basic sociology. Yes, a group in power wants to stay in power because by being in power, they have access to money, prestige, status, protection, and all types of things. So if that group is feeling threatened, that their money, their power, the land, the territory that they own is being threatened by an individual or an organization or movement, they're going to repress, they're going to punish. So sociology has this thing of social sanctions or another way of saying punishment. We might think of it as rewards and punishments. That's why the coons get money, the informants get paid. That's a reward, right? Or if you the brother that was stealing cars and then ratted out Huey P. Newton, which excuse me, ratted out
Fred
oh
Hampton.
man, Fred Hampton, thank you, and led to his assassination. His payment was they forgot about his jail sentence, right? So the people who cooperate with the state get rewarded, and the people who resist the state get punished, right? So that's the basic sociology right there. So when we talking about people like H. Rap Brown, Fred Hampton, Asada, any one of these people, these are Malcolm. In the extreme case, they took his life, right? So we're talking about what happens when you go against a state apparatus. And although we are angered by it, as we should be, and saddened by it, it's important we understand that that is as normal, if you want to use that word, as you breathing air. That's what they do. They're going to protect their power, and they can also do it by making you look crazy. They could do it. One of the tactics COINTELPRO did, which I don't hear people talk about, they would have anonymous people calling people's friends, calling people's family members, calling people's jobs and telling them, I don't know if you know, but that guy you messing with, no good. He's no good. He's this, and that. And so now what? He's ostracized. His own friends don't return his calls. He's wondering what happened, what's going on. His funds dry up. His family don't invite him over no more. This is what they do, right? So there's a million different ways they do it. But the point is, if you resist, they punish you, and they punish you, some because they enjoy punishing. That's kind of a whole nother story about their being sadists and masochists. They get pleasure out of punishing people. But most of them do it to make sure that they protect the power that they have or believe themselves to have. So that you'll find that all throughout history. And I should say, although our target audience is black people, this is any government apparatus with any group of people. So you can be in Ireland, the Irish Republican Army has been fighting with the government that's Protestant and they're Catholic and a whole bunch of things, and they bombing stuff and they getting arrested and killed. It's the same thing. They're rising up against the government punishes them. So this happens irrespective of location, racial classification, or gender. This is what institutions in power do.
Okay, so you also talked about illness and the bone cancer that he had. And a lot of us here on this side of the wall are noticing that some of our revolutionary freedom fighters that are being held as political prisoners, a lot of them seem to be coming down with a rare form of bone cancer, which is rare. And this is only occurring in the prisons. You think this may be assassination by medicine or lack thereof?
That's a good question. And the way I would answer that is, history, as Brother Malcolm said, is best qualified to reward our research. So we can only speculate because we don't have empirical evidence. We actually can't say we know for sure. But what we can say is, if you're the descendants ideologically and politically of people who took people from Africa, raped them, branded them with hot irons like they were cattle, forbade them to pray to their deities, to practice, to play their drum, to speak the language, cut babies out of women's stomachs. If you can do that, if you connect with the people, your ancestors that did that, I assume anything is on the table, right? So the other thing we know is that black people in this country were victims of medical experiments. People should check out the book Medical Apartheid. Medical experiments, taking parts out of people without letting them know, and then using those parts to grow cells like Henrietta Lacks, and then that's then used to treat all types of illnesses in this country. Billions of dollars made off of that. That woman's family hasn't gotten a dime. Or brothers injected with plutonium, or the Tuskegee experiment, where brothers had syphilis. There's a people think they were given syphilis. They weren't given syphilis. Some of them had syphilis, but what the government did, using Tuskegee University, very important. You see how we talk about that complicity. You see how we're rewarded for complying with the state. So some doctors from Tuskegee University rounded up these poor black men who were mostly illiterate and told them and tested them. Oh, they got syphilis? That's the control group. And they told them, you have bad blood. If you want to know more, read the book called Bad Blood. And basically, it knew that these brothers had syphilis. They knew. And they left, even though in 1945 they discovered penicillin was the cure for syphilis. Years after that, they let these brothers continue with the syphilis, did not give them the cure, so they could study the effects of syphilis on an untreated body. And if you don't know, people go crazy, get dementia, paralysis, a lot of blindness. So this country has a history, family, of, this isn't conspiracy theory, of medically torturing and experimenting with black bodies. So that said, also in a Puerto Rican context, which also relates to the United States, a man that I deeply respect, Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who many call the Malcolm X of Puerto Rico, fiery brother, nationalist brother, sent a cadre of people to the White House and shot it up, family. He's real. They don't teach people about him. And the leader, LeBron and all them, they took this man, Harvard trained, by the way, Harvard trained lawyer, came back to Puerto Rico and set it on fire. They put him in prison and they radiated that man, directly radiated him, and gave him cancer. So once you know the history, it's no longer sounding like people are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Now it's like, well, damn, if they did all that, yeah, I could see them doing that. Yeah, it's possible. Definitely possible. When you look at the history of experimentation on us and how medicine is used is weaponized against enemies of the state. So sure, that's on the table, good brother. Yeah.
Yeah, we got brother Hassan Burton in the chat. He's always on the check-in. He's fact family for sure. He said that losing H.Rap Brown, aka Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, is the last of an era. And I kind of share his sentiment. This feels like the end of an era. You know, we had that Black Power movement. We just lost Assata Shakur. And then just subsequent to that, we lost H.Rap Brown, Jamil Al-Amin. And to me, it feels like the end of an era. Do you share that same sentiment?
Well, in a sense, I do. It's just like it's seeing your aunties and your uncles dying. So it would be the same like when I look at my own family and say, wow, my mother's 85, my father's gone, all my grandparents are gone. So yeah, it's kind of like you seeing the people you love who have helped to shape who you are dying. That's natural, even if they were in a movement or not. But now when you look at it like, wow, these are national figures who had great meaning, not just for me in the household, but for millions of black people, it does seem like the end of an era. However, for those who are feeling demoralized, because I'm not a preacher of demoralization, I'm going to always tell you, I don't care what they're doing. You keep your head up, you keep fighting, keep doing the work. Learn from past mistakes and go forward. Here's the thing you got to remember. Just like Donald Trump and his minions are the ideological descendants of Confederate soldiers, guess what? We are the ideological descendants of Nat Turner and Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X. So as long as we're alive, then we're going to continue to work. We're going to escalate the activity, and we're going to teach our babies. So that's never going to stop.
Nice.
Never.
Now, brother Agyei, now we have you on here, I do want to play a piece of sound from H.Rap Brown. This is a little under 2 minutes, and this is probably one of the most heard speeches that you would hear him give. This is one of the most popular ones. I want to come back and talk about this. Take a listen.
Lyndon Johnson He can always raise an argument about law and order because he never talks about justice. But black people fall for that same argument, and they go around talking about lawbreakers. We did not make the laws in this country. We are neither morally nor legally confined to those laws. Those laws that keep them up keep us down. You got to begin to understand that. For 400 years, she taught you white nationalism, and you left it up. You taught it to your children. You had your children thinking that everything black was bad. Black cows don't give good milk. Black hens don't lay eggs. Black for funerals, white for weddings. That's white nationalism. Santa Claus. A white honky who slides down a black chimney and comes out white. We tend to equate progress with concessions. We can no longer make that mistake. You see, when they gave us that nigger astronaut, you say we were making progress, but I told you they were going to lose him in space. He didn't get that far. You put Adam Clayton Powell in office and you couldn't keep him. What you think they're going to do with Thurgood Marshall when they get tired of him? They gave you Walter Washington of Washington, D.C., and you said we were making progress. That's not progress. See, it's no in between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. That's like telling me you can be a little bit pregnant.
All right, brother Agyei, this many years later, it's a black and white video, so evidently it's obviously very old, but the impact is still there. A certain humorous sensibility it still can be felt. What are your thoughts now as you look back at that video and you're hearing some of the things he said, and it's still relevant to this day? What are you thinking when you hear that?
I'm thinking that Brother Malcolm did a great job. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Garvey did a great job because he's the ideological grandfather of Malcolm, whose parents were Garveyites. And I'm thinking Malcolm did a wonderful job because H. Rap Brown and Stokely and all of the people of that generation were the ideological sons and daughters of Malcolm. They're following what they believe Malcolm was trying to do. They're trying to carry out what Malcolm didn't get to because he was shot down in 65. So my first thought is Malcolm, I know the ancestors welcomed him with open arms and said, well done, my son, because he in that era, in the late, I'm going to say 20th century, probably more than anyone, popularized black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and all of the ideas that come with those two ideologies. Before him, the person would have been Marcus Garvey, and he continued right in the footsteps of Brother Garvey.
He said, the same laws that keep them up, keep us down. And I think it's important at this point to mention that the Black Power movement, the key and the chief principal idea that came out of the Black Power movement was this idea of self-determination, independence as opposed to incorporation, trying to assimilate into their system. What are your thoughts when you hear him say that? The same laws that keep them up, keep us down. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, again, that goes back to that basic sociology I was talking about. That's group dynamics. Obviously, the state makes the laws for themselves and against the people who they see as enemies of the state. To give this context, during the American Revolutionary War, George Washington was an enemy of the state, right? Because they're fighting Great Britain.
That's right.
They're rebelling against the largest empire on the earth. So in that context, George Washington and everybody in the Revolutionary Army were enemies of the state. And had they lost the war, they would have had their heads chopped off or would have been put in prison forever. But because they won the war, he can be president of a new country called the United States. So it depends on what side you fall on, right? It really depends on who's in power as to how you are judged or defined. And remember, you're always defined by the state. The state's definition overrides the popular people's definition because the state is in power. But it's always relative, family. It's always relative. Malcolm is shot down and killed. Fred Hampton is shot down and killed. Mumia and all types of people locked away in prison. But if the adherents of Black Power and the Black Arts Movement had been victorious, it would have been a whole different scenario. You might see H. Rap Brown on your currency. You might see Brother Malcolm, federal buildings named after Brother Malcolm, because they would have won. So it's all relative. It depends on who's in power. So absolutely.
Yeah, Brother Hassan Burton in the chat says, in 1998, I copped an album of H. Rap Brown's speeches he did in 1968. He said he hasn't been the same ever since. I think H. Rap Brown is easily the most unsung hero of the Black Power movement. You know, we talk about Fred Hampton, we talk about Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, you know, we talk about Assata Shakur, but I think H. Rap Brown does not get the mention that he deserves. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think I think there's a lot of people, there's people we don't even know about. That's the other part. Like even H. Rap Brown has a lot of celebrity in the movement, but there's people we don't even know about. But certainly I would say that he probably is one of the more underrated. And I want to say this too, because I had a personal experience with Brother H. Rap Brown. Back in Syracuse, when I was president of the Student African American Society, we brought him up to speak. At this point, he was an imam. And I asked him very pointedly in our big thousands of people in the auditorium, I asked him, I believe his name was Jamil Al-Amin. I said, Brother Imam, back in the day, you advocated revolution, violent revolution, overthrow of the government. As a Muslim Imam, I'm assuming your politics have changed a little bit, your trajectory. How do you reconcile that? It wasn't to challenge him. It was more of an academic, And he said, well, brother, and it's the way he said this, I'll never forget. He said, well, brother, I participate in revolution 5 times a day. And he winked. So that means, for those who know Islam, they pray 5 times a day. So what he's saying, he's speaking in 2 languages. He's saying that I still advocate for changing the governments and that, but now I look at it a more spiritual sort of context. But he also winked at me. So I didn't know if he's saying, he gave a sanitized answer, but the wink might have been, I'm still about that business. Because remember, even though he was an imam and we would assume, okay, he's nonviolent, don't we know there's some Muslim imams and organizations around the world that will participate in violence in revolutionary terms? Of course, right? We know that. And we know that when he was in Atlanta, he was doing some big things. He was dealing with internal stuff now. It seemed like he switched from blasting the government as an external entity to now saying, okay, let's get our people off drugs. Let's make sure our people are eating. Let's make sure our people are working. So he's still about the work, just that he may have moved and he's older. We have to remember, family. Muhammad Ali said, if you're 50 and you think the exact same way as you did at 20, that's a problem. So as he got older, it would make sense that maybe his way of looking at things or what he thought was most effective might change, but he was still working with Black people to make them better. That's a fact.
And he talked a lot about revolution, which means change. And the Black Power movement was about taking direct action. And like I said, the chief principle idea that came out of the Black Power movement was this idea of self-determination. And on the subject of the Black Power movement, the celebration of Kwanzaa came out of the Black Power movement. And Kwanzaa is actually something that stood the test of time. I think this was one of the ultimate manifestations of this idea of self-determination that H. Rap Brown and others were trying to convey and get across. What do you think about Kwanzaa not only being a revolutionary act, something that kind of goes against the grain of the culture, but it's also one of the manifestations of this idea of self-determination?
Yes. I think I want to start by saying 2 of the most important. A lot of people say the Black Power movement didn't produce anything. So they compare it to the Civil Rights movement. They say, well, Civil Rights movement got us Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, and all these different things. And they'll say that the Black Power movement didn't produce anything. And I'd like to challenge that. The Black Power movement, if nothing else, produced two definite things. Produces Black studies. That's a fact. That comes straight out of the Black Power movement. And it also produced Kwanzaa as a cultural celebration, right? Not religious. Karenga is real clear. This is not a religious celebration, but a cultural celebration now celebrated by more than 35 million Black, African, and diasporan people around the world, right? And that goes from December 26th to January 1st. It's about a week. It begins right after Christmas. And it's really good in a practical way because you don't have to go run into the white man and spend thousands of dollars to impress your family members with Kwanzaa. With Kwanzaa, you can make them a card. You could send them an ebook. You could do all types of things that don't cost a bunch of money to put you in debt or set you back to celebrate your loved ones. It celebrates family coming together. And it also ties into the Nguzo Saba, which everybody has heard of the 7 principles, but that comes from a much larger framework that Maulana Karenga developed called Kawaida theory. It's a whole theory that comes out of. And I would suggest people look up Kawaida theory on the internet. I used to have the little booklet, breaks it all down. Very, very interesting. And Maulana Karenga was a cultural nationalist, right? So they focused on changing our views and values and priorities and how we think. In addition to, they endorsed wearing African clothing, changing our names to African names, and things of that nature. So his name was Ron, and Karenga, I think he changed his name. Maulana basically means master teacher. So he changed his names, kind of like Brother Malcolm did, and many people did during the Black Power movement. But this is important because it's not celebrating a white Jesus or any white deity. No offense to those who are Christian in the traditional white Christian context. No offense. Just stating facts. Also, he puts it around what we call a harvest sort of a festival, which is the times in ancient Africa where the people came together and celebrated. Why? Because they got their fruits and vegetables, which may have taken 4 to 6 months to produce from seeds to crop. This was a big deal. This is when they eat and they celebrate it. So he's bringing back what you call these harvest traditions of ancient Africa, and this is where he centers Kwanzaa around. And it's the 7 principles, the Nguzo Saba, which in Swahili means 7 principles. And each day has a principle, and I'm going to go through them quickly because, and I'm going to argue that get the most out of these principles when you give flesh and muscle to them. If you just keep them as Umoja's unity, and then you're not getting it. That's not what this is. These are things that can change your life. I need to say that. These are things, if you really get them, it can change your life. It can put your family in a better financial situation, more secure. So it can make you more loving in your relationships. It can make you a better parent. It can make you a better business person, a better coworker. Family, this is real stuff. So let's go through them. And as I go through them, I hope we think about how can I embody these principles every day? How can I make this Kwanzaa 365? So I'm not waiting to December 26th, right? Because are you just alive on December 26th? No, you're alive all year, hopefully. So if you're alive every day, remember, family, this goes back to my philosophy, turtle philosophy. It's not the things you do every now and then that make or break you. It's the things you do consistently. And that's where some of us don't get it. Showing up with the big present on her birthday or anniversary, that's really nice. But what she would more respect is every day you showing and proving that she's the center of your life. Coming up to your kid's big birthday or graduation is great. But what they would really respect is your presence consistently in their life, via phone, via visit, whatever. But you stay connected to them. And we got to get that, because if we get that, that's one of the keys to our development. Not waiting for these grandiose displays or something, but doing it every day, little things every day. So anyway, Umoja is for unity. Kujichagulia is for what Brother Ra is talking about, self-determination. Ujamaa, collective work and responsibility. Nia, for purpose. No, excuse me. I said Ujamaa cooperative economics. That's something we got to get on immediately because let me just tell you in case you didn't know, because of the president, a lot of black people have lost federal jobs for no ethical reason. A lot of people who aren't even qualified to do certain jobs have jobs because of their being patronizing to the president. So this is telling us social services, they closed the government down for longer than ever in history. It's going to take people SNAP benefit family. If you don't get it yet, newsflash, hello, you can't depend on them. Right now, every family should be meeting and talking about, we got lawyers and accountants and we got teachers and we got all. How do we put this together and build business? Every one of our families should be thinking that. How do we work together and stop competing and stop fighting with each other? How do we work together, harmonize to create our own enterprises for ourselves? And that's called cooperative economics, or Ujamaa. A shout out by way to the Ujamaa Residence Hall at Cornell University, man. It was an all-black dorm family back in the day.
Wow.
Nia is purpose. Kuumba is creativity. And the last, of course, we end with Imani, which is faith. Now, notice the two most important at the beginning and the end. None of the stuff in the middle matters if there's no unity. None of the stuff in the middle matters if you have no faith. So it's what I teach people as an empowerment coach, Brother Ra. You know, we'll say stuff like, we'll do affirmations. I attract prosperity. I am in perfect health. But you don't believe it. It's like, man, that means nothing if you don't believe. The faith and the unity are the glue. That's why they're the top and bottom of the list. With those things in place, everything works out, right? If you have faith, you can take your little $5. You say, I don't have a lot. I can't invest no money. Yes, you can. Today, you can invest with as little as $5 in some of these online investment things. So the person with faith will say, all I can give is $5 a month. And they'll put that $5 a month in. The person with no faith say, I can't, that's not going to get me nothing. That person that's putting that $5 in every month, compound interest. They're going to see dividends. The person that's talking themselves out of everything because they lack faith will see nothing. And because inflation eats away your dollar, that money you throw in a savings account making no real interest is losing money every day. So it's the faith that's very important in the unity. I believe in the scripture, at least the Bible, it says Jesus allegedly said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to that mountain, move, and it would move into the sea. Faith, family, is the glue. Faith achieves things, that miracles you wouldn't believe. So that would be how I would sum it up, Brother Ra, and then I'll go on it, whatever other commentary or questions you have from that, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what you said about the principles. It's not something we just talk about. It's not something that's just a theory. We have to make those principles practice, and we got to practice those every day. So it's not just a list. It sounds fly to reel it off the top of your head. It's almost like, knowing 120 lessons or something, and you sound good saying it. Now you got to show and proof. You got to act on that list. So, we talk about things that came out of the Black Power movement. I think not only Kwanzaa, but Nguzo Saba, because Nguzo Saba existed before Kwanzaa. In fact, Kwanzaa was based on these 7 ideas. And there's a backstory to that as well, where the Nguzo Saba came from. I would direct people that are watching this to look up the aims and objectives of Marcus Garvey. It's really called the Aims and Objectives for Movement of Negro People. But if you search Aims and Objectives of Marcus Garvey, you will see all 7 principles of the Nguzo Saba in the Aims and Objectives of Marcus Garvey. That's where that came from. So he said in the Aims and Objectives that there should be a universal confraternity among the race. Marcus Garvey was very flowery with his words. Confraternity is just a fancy word that means unity. Like on college campus, you have a fraternity, right? So confraternity just means unity. So that list was compiled, and the celebration of Kwanzaa was created around that list. Now, you touched on something that I think is very important. I would like for you to get back to it and expound on it a little bit. I think one of the most profound things that I've learned over the years doing this work is the idea that In the European tradition, the highest ideal is the thing. And the thing could be material possessions, money, colonizing another people's country. The highest ideal is the thing or the acquisition of the thing. In African culture, the highest ideal is relationships, one to another. And the anthropologists, the white anthropologists, when they first started going into the interior of Africa and they started to study the people, they noticed that the people had an exceptional amount of group solidarity, group loyalty, and they practiced collectivism. What are your thoughts on this idea that European culture is based on competing with each other like capitalism, where African culture is based more on collectivism and cooperation, or ujamaa, as we say?
I definitely think that anybody who's interested in Black liberation, and even if you're just interested in living a better life, healthy, mentally and physically life, based on harmony with your people, you have to appreciate and study the key differences between what we might call European versus African thought. And one of the key differences is that Europeans are obsessed with things, with matter. So that could be bottled water, a laptop, lights, phones, whatever, wealth, right? Whereas the Africans, and this is going to sound crazy, bear with me, were really big on invisible things, on spiritual things, right? Things like unity, solidarity, love, friendship, brother and sisterhood, right? These are invisible concepts. We believed, you may have heard the expression, and Brother Rod, I know you heard it, and we never thought of it. Mind over matter. You ever heard of that?
Sure.
Mind over matter. That means thought, consciousness. We were people who vibed on consciousness, how one thinks, how one conducts themselves, their character, how they treat people, right? Invisible concepts. But if you get those invisible concepts, you can manifest physical things, right? That's the key. So if you read the Kabbalion, which is attributed to ancient Kemet and to Greece, well, that's a misnomer. It's all coming from ancient Kemet. Those principles, those 7 principles, correspondence, rhythm, polarity. But the first one is all things are mental, and all things are mind, and the mind is all things. Consciousness. In other words, we were taught to be like the European, which is one of the reasons we fail. I believe it when I see it. You see it first. You believe it, and you see it here as a vision before it's even in existence.
Right.
And then you back that up with faith, and you make what's invisible in your mind appear in the physical realm, right? That's how we operate it. So now you telling people your great idea, and this is what they hit you with. Yeah, I hear you. I see when I believe it. I believe when I see it. You got it wrong, because everything that you see physically was an invisible idea. Somebody thought, man, we're going to bottle water and we're going to sell it. That was an invisible idea. And somebody had a vision. They saw it in their mind, and they made it into a physical reality. So one of our dominant themes and traits as Africans is this, and it's all mystics that tell you this, all spiritualists that study ancient texts will tell you, mind over matter, man. If you can see it, you can make it happen. What happens with us is we were taught to think like some other folks, and nothing's important to them. If it's not physical, if you can't touch it, taste it, see it, it's not important. And that, my friends, is completely ahistorical and acultural for us. We thought differently. We said, no, you got to see it first. And then you bring it to fruition. So if you're a materialist, if everything to you is matter, guess what matters to you? The things you can touch, money, guns, right? Those things matter to you. And then you look down on people who don't have the matter that you think is important. They don't matter. But our people taught differently, say, no. Get your mind right. George Clinton said, get your mind right and your ass will follow. And he's right and exact.
That's right.
Right. So that's why all the political people we respect talk about the C word of consciousness. You got to raise your consciousness. What are they saying? That's African. They're saying your frequency and your vibration is what creates matter, not the other way around. And so we got it backwards. And so if your thought process, if you're a doctor and you got the wrong diagnosis, your prescription is going to be wrong. You're giving somebody an aspirin and they got a damn tumor because you misdiagnosed them, right? So one of the things is definitely how we see the world. So look, if I see everything on this planet as coexisting with me, which includes animals, vegetation, other human beings, how will that affect the way I interact with them? I'll be kind to the animals. I won't abuse animals. I won't pollute the earth because I realize all of this I'm sharing with everyone. The air that I breathe, right now, the air we breathe, Brother Ra, I read a thing that said the air we're breathing right now will one day be all the way in Japan on the other sides of the world. The same air. So if you're the type person, mine, what type of behavior does that produce?
Exactly.
And so that's how I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's one of the key ways that in terms of cosmology, a worldview, we might say the African worldview is different from the European worldview. We don't come here seeking to hurt nobody. We're not trying to impose on people what they do, to the extent that what you're doing doesn't violate us. That's when it stops. That's when we may have to go to war. Other than that, we're not trying to go pollute nobody, mess up nobody, hurt anybody in any way. That's how we're fundamentally different. Also, if you look at Africa and you look at the natural resources, how were we in want? What did we want for that we didn't have access to? We had fruit, we had water, we had everything you could think of. Sure. Other people were in environments where they were frozen and did not have that type of beautiful weather, that sun, the wildlife, all varieties of wildlife and plants and herbs. People talk about this Garden of Eden and think it's an illusion. And I'm going to tell you the Garden of Eden is right on the continent of Africa, fam. Right there. It's the only continent that exists in all 4 hemispheres of the earth. North, south, west, and east. Most mineral resources, that's the Garden of Eden. And guess who came from it first? Hello.
Right. But now, Brother Agyei, if I could add on to what you're saying, among the Twa, yes, the Twa, the small people, Europeans refer to them as pygmy, but that's a pejorative, so I don't use that word. But the Twa, in their language, there's no word for scarcity because they have everything in abundance. I thought that was interesting. But if I could add on to what you're saying, this concept of the most important things not being physical. So we mentioned group solidarity, group loyalty, and collectivism, right? Ujamaa, working together. Relationships, mutual respect, social cohesion, and social harmony. These are not physical things. These were the most important ideas. Deep respect for elders. That's something we could use now. Many of us have parents and uncles and older people in our family that we respect and we would want the world to respect them because they're older, right? A deep respect for ancestors, another thing that comes out of African culture. Emphasis on family. Focus on the well-being of the children. Among the Masi people in Kenya, they greet each other by saying, "Are the children well?" Because they know that the children are a reflection of the parents, right? If your child conducts themselves in a bad way, then that reflects poorly on the parent.
Sir.
You mentioned it, a respect for nature and eco-friendly living. Africans were not mining for oil and digging for diamonds and destroying or hydro-fracking the earth, cracking the crust of the earth to get the gas out. I think this is important. And a lot of African culture is based on this. And I feel like this is something we overlook. Again, something you can't physically touch. It's an idea. But the concept of gratitude, that was very central to ancient Kemet, right? Grateful for the water, the sky, the air, the earth. Europeans look at that and say, oh, well, they had many gods and it was polytheism. No, it was gratitude. It's people on the outside looking in, not understanding our culture. And I think this is something else that gets overlooked as it relates to African culture. Teaching morality through storytelling and proverbs. because those storytelling, those proverbs, they convey ideas, right? This is not a physical thing. These were the most important things. Philosophical values like ma'at and ubuntu, right? Character development. We have Hassan Burton in the chat. He said the African perspective is we, the European perspective is I, which is individualism. Now, brother Agyei, the European.
Can I say something real quick on that, brother? I want to add this too. This is important. If it was just if our beauty was just in the fact that we were believed in the group solidarity and all that, that would be good. But it's not just, our beauty doesn't just lie in we're unselfish and that we see ourselves as one. We also don't seek to do harm. Because you could have, look, an army is all together. They have solidarity. An oppressive army, the white colonizers had solidarity, but they were oppressing people and taking their land and raping women. So on top of the solidarity, it's our ethos that separates us. We do no harm. So when we talk about Mayat is completely about doing no harm. Go through the 42 so-called negative confessions.
Right.
I have not caused anyone to cry. Listen to that. I have not caused anyone to cry. Wow. Think about that. I have not taken food from children. I have not cursed gods. I have not fouled the water or the land. I have not taken life. So we had this idea about you're not a man or a woman based on how much money you get, sex you got, how tall you are, this ridiculous stuff that we judge people by today. How the car you drive. How good are you to people? How many people could say that you enhanced their life, that you brought beauty to them? That's how we looked at things. And if you look at things that way, you create this thing called civilization, which arguably we don't see too much. We see a bunch of nation states with governments, but I don't know if we could say these are civilizations, right? So I want to say that's very important, that we weren't devils on this earth. We didn't come and cause chaos and mayhem and we could recognize everybody. As long as you don't come here with no foolishness, we all good, right? And that separated us, because I'm assuming we could have gone and been colonizing people. Wasn't nobody trying to colonize nobody, right?
Right.
So that's important too.
Yeah, and this ties into the whole conversation about Kwanzaa. Brother Hassan Burton said the African perspective is we, the European perspective is I. It was the European that said, I think, therefore I am. It was the African that said, I am because we are, right? There was always that we. And this ties into each principle of concept and principle of Kwanzaa as it relates to the Nguzo Saba that you went into. Umoja is unity. That's we, right? Kuji Chagulia, self-determination. It's talking about us being self-determined as a group. Ujamaa is collective work, right? Ujamaa is group economics. This is the we as opposed to just individualistic thinking, right? So, Brother Agyei, with the time that we have, and I want to thank you for dropping all those jewels, man. I appreciate it. With the time we have left, I want you to talk again about your ebooks and tell people where they can get the ebooks and even the actual physical books.
Yeah, you can go online to get the physical books. If you type my name in right there on the screen, go to Amazon, type my name in. Or if you want to get it personally from me, get it signed, that type of thing. Some people don't like to mess with Amazon. Then you can hit me up in my email. That would be powercoach@wukusu.com.
Okay.
powercoach@wukusu.com. If you wanted to, or hit me up on Facebook, type my name in Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and you can, if you want a personal copy from me and not through Amazon. And yeah. So family, I hope that y'all see these principles. Once again, those principles are invisible ideas, right? But you got to give them flesh. You got to put flesh on those bones by operationalizing them. So learn them and memorize them. But most importantly, teach them and embody them, demonstrate them. You can't say you love somebody and you're not doing no chores. You ain't helping out. You ain't comforting them when they're sick and upset. You're not going out your way to make sure that their life is easier. then that's an invisible concept that's dead. To give the invisible concept life, to breathe the breath of life into it, you have to embody it and demonstrate it. So I don't want people going here thinking because they recite the Nguzu Saba, they down by law.
Right.
You got a good memory, fam. God bless you. But this has to be practiced.
Absolutely.
And this has to be taught for it to stay alive. And that's one of Karenga's. People got a lot negative to say about Brother Karenga. I don't go for that. What he did was created something that still lives and that we still celebrate and that has kept many of us out of jail, kept many of us in decent relationships, and kept many of us thinking positively and helping our people. And you can't knock that, family. That's lasted for over 40 years. He has to get kudos for that, and the US organization.
Absolutely. And in closing, I want to say that knowing your history is also an important part of the culture, and love for your culture is part of the culture. You know, we've been taught to love and embrace everybody else's culture. We've been taught to pray to invisible white people. We've been taught to do things that were outside of our culture, traditional African culture, before contact with Europeans. Brother Agyei, I want to thank you again, brother. You always come on here and drop so many jewels. I definitely look forward to bringing you back on next month. So I will say in closing, stay safe, brother, and stay Pan-African.
You know it.
And peace. I want to send everybody to if you want to reach Brother Agyei, powercoach@wukusu.com. That was put in the chat. And I want to give a big shout out to Brother Hassan Burton, because he's always in the chat chiming in. So we all definitely appreciate what you do. All right, Brother Agyei, we'll talk again soon, brother.
Peace and Black Power.
Peace.